Hi, welcome to the Community Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Welsh, and this is episode 15. And today we get to speak with longtime resident Mark Ritter, who managed, operated, and eventually sold off Crown Distributing, who was the distributor for Coors Light and the Coors product for the surrounding area. We're going to talk to him a little bit about some legacy of what his father did for Salina, Kansas. He was even mayor back around 1986. Then we're going to dive deep into what Mark feels about the community of downtown, where it's headed, and some insight if you want to join and be a volunteer for a non-for-profit. Couple of tips of what you need to know. Let's join now and talk to my good friend, Mark Ritter. We're here with Mark Ritter today, and we're going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour, depends on how good you are. I may have to cut you short. It could be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But with you, you've got so many stories, and I've got a lot of stories on you that we're going to tell.
I want to know where you heard those stories.
Yeah, I did some work this morning.
I think you did.
And luckily I didn't get a hold of Rob Pickerel because he didn't answer his phone this morning.
That's good.
And we would do that. But before we
He's
get
probably
started,
on the golf course.
Probably so. Before we get started with that, we got to hold up our Mocha's cups.
Yes.
That's our sponsor. And so we want to thank Mocha's and JRI for sponsoring the podcast. You stopped down there and got yours.
Absolutely.
This morning. What'd you pick up?
I got my Americano with a little bit of honey and some cream.
A little bit of honey and cream.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just hot chocolate.
That's good.
I'm still just the hot chocolate
Cheers.
guy. Cheers to you. Yeah. So
Thank you, Todd.
we're going to enjoy that. So thanks again to Mocha's for sponsoring that. So let's dive in. Usually we talk about everything you're doing in the community since we're community leaders. But with you, I've watched you build an amazing business. I watched you and your sister. We have to involve your sister as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about. So for those who don't know, your dad purchased Crown Distributing. Well, it wasn't called Crown back then. What would they have been called?
Well, back then, Todd, and we're talking back in the 50s,
Yeah.
40s and 50s, actually late 40s, and it was called S&H Distributing. And that was Salina and Hayes. They owned Hayes also. And
So what they distributed was the Coors Light.
Coors Light came out in 1978.
Oh, it did? Okay.
So it was just Coors Banquet.
The
It
old
was the
Coors,
yellow can.
the yellow can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they owned Salina and Hayes, and that was about the time that my dad went to work for him. And before that, he was a Falstaff distributor, Falstaff and Hams and Olympia, and then they hired him away from there, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. So your dad's name was Joe Ritter.
Correct.
And I will tell you that while I was growing up, I moved here again in 89, graduated high school, moved here in 89. And as an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, the name Ritter was, like there was a name in town.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Joe Ritter was along right with Charlie Walker. I mean, those guys were buddies, I remember. They were buddies. And where you saw Joe, you saw Charlie a lot of times. And I thought of your dad as the same type of businessman as Charlie Walker. I didn't know your dad very well. Again, I was younger and I just didn't know him. But, and matter of fact, I didn't even really meet you until, I don't even know when we actually met. But
it was probably right soon after you came to town, I believe.
Yeah, could be from there. But tell me a little bit about who your dad was.
Of course, Dad was one of 11 kids, and they lived at 712 West Iron in a little 2-bedroom home with 11 kids. Classic story of growing up without any money. They were a poor family, but yet they were rich with love and my dad worked for his father, who happened to own Ritter Tile Shop, and I'm sure a lot of people that name rings a bell. And my grandfather and his grandfather started that company, and there's a lot of history around Salina.
So the Ritter name goes back a long way in Salina.
It goes way back, and not in the beer business, but in the tile business.
Okay.
And so then,
you got to drink a lot of beer to lay tile.
That's true.
I can see the correspondence there.
Right.
Yeah.
So Dad did that for a little while, but with 10 brothers and sisters, it was kind of hard to feed 10 or 11 families out of that business, and so Dad saw the writing on the wall and he ventured out into doing other things. And I honestly, Todd, he went to work selling real estate for, and it was Johnson was his last name. I can't think of it.
Yeah.
But George Johnson,
Yep.
correct. Mm-hmm. And Dad went to work for him, selling some real estate, and then he went to work for Colgate Palmolive, working in the grocery stores, stocking shelves for them, and then he went to work for Falstaff and Hams, and
See, I like that you say that. I hate to keep interrupting you, but
It's okay.
for the people that are watching, it's like you don't have to know what you want to do at age 23, 24, 25, 26. I mean, people will be like, dude, I'm 40 and I don't even know what I want to do, okay? But I love those stories because as I watch friends of my sons and I'm watching people that I know, these kids are going, God, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. And the truth is, you don't have to right now. You just have to do something.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have to get involved and then to find out what your passion is, because your passion could change throughout the time.
Correct. And you know, I graduated in 1978 from Sacred Heart, and you know, I had in the back of my mind, I always knew I worked summer job down at Crown Distributors working for my dad, and actually even before that I worked for Mr. Helbert, Bill Helbert, who owned the company before my father. And so I kind of, you know, I had this beer business thing in my blood, and it was fun. And I mean, everybody likes drinking beer, not everybody, but it was fun, and it was hard work, but it was very rewarding work. And
So that would be your only job you've ever had then?
That was pretty much. That
Wow.
was my only job. When I went to KU, I did an internship in Topeka at the State House and worked for Senator Ben Vidrickson. Ben was incredible. A lot of people in this community know Ben, and he did a lot for this community. But I worked for him as an intern at the State House, and that was when I was a political science major. And of course, in the back of my mind, I always thought, I'm going to end up in the beer business.
Yeah.
And I did. And when I went to KU, I worked for 3.5 years for the Coors distributor in Lawrence, and that was a part-time job. So yeah, I did that a lot. That was kind of my forte, I guess.
So your dad bought it so he was working for them. So it started in the 50s as a distributor. Then your dad bought it. We were trying to figure out, it's like 87, 88, 89,
like
90.
That.
We'll say with 90.
In there. Right.
And then as I was reading about him, did he only own it for 6 years and then sold it to you guys?
It was about,
I mean, the website said 6 years. 6 to 8 years?
Yeah,
okay.
6 to 8 years. And of course, then I moved back to Salina in June of 84, and from Lawrence, and was 19 hours short of a degree. And I'll never forget, on a Sunday night, he called me, and that was always the time we were going to talk, was Sunday nights. And my mother had passed away when I was 21, so it was just Dad and I and my sister. And so he calls me on a Sunday night. He says, you know, you've been playing around up there for over 6 years. He goes, don't you think it's time to come home and go to work? And I thought about it, and I'm going, in the back of my mind, I'm going, well, I'm kind of having a lot of fun, but yeah, you know, I'm tired of being broke.
Yeah.
And so he told me right at the end of that conversation, he said, you know, Mark, I'm not getting any younger, and I'll tell you what, he said, you need to be, if you're not back here in 2 weeks, I'm going to sell this place. And I knew he meant business. And so it was at that point in my life, I'm going, okay, this part of my life is over, and it's time to go to work. So,
Wow.
So I moved home. I waited until the Friday of the second week, and loaded up a U-Haul truck with my dog, and moved home. And went to work on Monday morning at 5:30 in the morning, and I'll never forget it, Todd. I walked into the warehouse at 5:30 in the morning, and our warehouse manager handed me a big, long broom, and he said, Mark, this is what I call the idiot stick. And he said, how long do you want to push it? And it was an immediate challenge to me that I knew I didn't want to push that broom
Right.
for the rest of my life. And So yeah, that was the I would say the encouragement or the impetus for me to keep moving up and keep working hard and
So it was about 84, 85, 86
80,
in there. You're kind of
well, 84 is when I came back and went to work.
Okay.
And so and then I worked in the warehouse for a couple years. And, Dad wanted me to learn the business. Like most family businesses, you need to learn it from the bottom up. You need to learn how to do every job you can. One misconception, Todd, about family businesses is everybody thinks, oh, man, he's got it made. He's got a family business. But it's actually almost the opposite, and you gotta earn it. And I had to work my way up from the bottom, and there was many times I was thinking about this isn't for me, and being out till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then having to be at work at 5:30 was a little tough.
Yeah.
But I was young. And,
well, that's what you were saying, because when you're peddling beer, your customers are not out at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Your customers
Right.
that you need to be entertaining to are out at after 10 and
Correct.
all the way till 2.
Right.
And
Right.
so if you want to go out there and promote it and buy people beers, I can remember many times you
Yep.
be at a bar, and you'd see me at a bar, and I'd already have a Coors Light. Like I said, that's where you and I connected on there, because
You were
I'm
a
from
great
Denver.
customer.
I'm from Denver.
Right.
And all I knew growing up, I really didn't start drinking until I was 21, for sure,
Right, of course.
But when I did, my beer of choice was Coors Light. So when I moved down here, and then when I met Pam, she drank Coors Light.
Right.
And so we were like, that's how the marriage was made. We were both drinking Coors Light, and that had to be enough connection,
Right.
Once she drank enough of Coors Light, I looked attractive, and then the rest was history, So that's how that worked out.
I don't know about that.
But so let's go back to, how did your sister get involved then? Because you guys end up purchasing this company from your dad.
Yeah, we started buying my dad out. He set up with his attorneys set up a buyout plan, and at the time, and I'll go back a little bit. At the time, we weren't very big. We only sold about 700,000 cases of beer, and that was 21 counties. And we went from Salina all the way northeast to Marysville. That was our farthest run. And of course, kind of the interesting thing for the beer aficionados out there, Coors wasn't in Nebraska back then. Coors wasn't in Missouri. This was back before the big growth curve. And so one of the things I'll never forget is we'd take a truckload of Coors Banquet only, all the way to Marysville, 2-hour drive. Dad had all the way there, and we'd go. And this was, like I said, before Coors was in Nebraska. Well, one liquor store in particular, we would unload at the front, and in the back door would be farmers lined up from Nebraska in their pickups, hauling it out the back door. And I mean, that was the Coors mystique, and. So getting back there to where you started, my sister and I started buying my dad out, and I want to say it was around a little before 90, maybe right a little bit after. Time flies when you're having fun. And so we ended up getting him paid off in 96. My sister came on. Carrie was she had several jobs there, like receptionist, and then of course she got married and started having children. So she really didn't do a whole lot, but her name was on the
Right.
contract, and everybody knew her as being in the beer business also. So,
Yep.
But I think we got Dad paid off in 96, 97.
So let's talk about the acquisitions, because I'm intrigued about how you went from owning that to then doing the research I looked at. You bought out 2 or 3 other companies, maybe Junction City and Topeka, and
yeah, actually we back then, Todd, there was a lot of if you wanted to get bigger in the business, you were either a shark or you were a minnow, and I knew right away after paying my dad off and really getting involved in the business, I knew I didn't want to be a minnow, and we knew the only way to grow the business was either through sales or through acquisition.
Right.
And so I met a guy from Junction City, Kansas. Kelly Frakes was his name, and Kelly's father. Kelly had his background was working for the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, and he was married, and so he moved back to Junction City, and he was working for his father, and his father. Here's a name that a lot of people will recognize, but his father worked for Fred Bramlage, and Fred Bramlage was the Coors distributor in Junction City, and he was also in the oil business. But Jerry, Kelly's dad, Jerry, worked for Fred, and of course Fred's the guy that gave K-State a fortune, and they named the basketball. K-State.
K-State. Oh, that's Bramlage.
Yeah, Bramlage Coliseum.
Right. How much of a sports person I am.
That's okay. And so Kelly and I talked, and Kelly was 6 years younger than I was, and hadn't a whole lot of experience in the beer business, and so we talked about Kelly. I told him, I said, hey, we need to talk about merging our businesses up, our territories together, and that way. The only way we're going to get bigger in this business is by acquisition. So Kelly and I merged, and that would have been in, I believe, 2002. And so then we went together, kept our name. They closed Junction City Distributing, and then we kept the Crown name. And for about 2 years, we worked together, and he would work the Manhattan market because they had K-State, and I would stay here and work in the Salina surrounding market. And so about 2 years later, we knew there was some talk about Coors Brewing Company and Miller Brewing Company doing a joint venture. And I knew, in talking with a lot of brewery people, I knew that we were going to have an opportunity to get bigger again. And they liked our performance. We were good at what we did, and so Kelly and I ended up back in 2004, right around 2004. We did 5 acquisitions. We did Heartland Beverage here in Salina, which was the Miller distributor. We purchased them. We purchased the Marysville Miller distributor, which was called Marcan. They were really small footprint. And then we purchased the Miller distributorship in Topeka. And then we purchased the Coors Miller distributorship in Emporia, Kansas. And lastly, we purchased the Coors distributor in Topeka. So it was 5 distributors that we put the deal together, and it was I was in the business for a little over 40 years, and that time I remember signing the loan. I'll never forget that, and it was a little scary.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. My dad looked at me and he said, and he was smiling, and he said, "I hope you know what you're doing." And I looked at him, and this is after we had brought in 900 different packages from Miller Brewing Company, and I looked at my dad and I said, "So do I."
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Well, you think about that, though. So a couple questions come up for me. So, again, from an entrepreneurial guy, that was the first thing went in there going, okay, I could imagine, like, where does a guy get that money? Like, did you go borrow the money to do that? So you had to put a presentation together for a bank and take it there, and then they loaned you the money to acquire all that stuff. Was there any, like, did they do any seller financing on the back end, or you just go and say, hey, I'm going to borrow it and I'm buying it all and I'm all in?
Well, first of all, we had to negotiate deals. We had to negotiate prices with all 5 of these folks, and so once we knew what this whole mega deal was going to cost us, and back.
So you're still in partners with this guy in Junction City.
Correct.
Doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all we had was equity. I didn't have any money, and Kelly didn't have any money, but we had equity. We had a lot of equity, and so we did what they call a merger of equals when Kelly and I merged, and so we put our equity down as our collateral. When we put both of our businesses down, fortunately we didn't have to put our house and our kids down, but it was close.
Yeah.
And we went to Sunflower Bank, and they, of course, I had some friends that worked there. I had a couple cousins that worked there, and so they knew me, and they knew what I was trying to do. They knew what my goals were. Our goal was to be one of the largest Miller Coors distributors in the state of Kansas, and we ended up being the second largest, next to Wichita. And so, we went to Sunflower Bank, and then at the time, Larry Brittingham was president of Sunflower, and Trey Mowry and Don Lamb. I can keep naming names because they were a team, and so we went to them with a business plan, and I could say how much we borrowed, but I don't want it to come across wrong, but it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
see, that's what I admire about you, though, because me being in the business, like, I'm kind of at that spot now going, okay, how big do I want to grow? I could stay exactly where I'm at. Do I want to go borrow a couple $1 million and take this, somewhere crazy? And so I admire you for that. They're like, like coming together and saying, okay, because you probably were doing just fine. You could have cruised through Salina.
We could have.
Just delivering to wherever you delivered to, made a nice little living, had a great family, done whatever you wanted to do, retired with a nice little nest egg, and been fine, and not had all the stress and all that stuff in there. But you want to get bigger, so you did that. But what would you? So let's go all the way back to. I want to go back to the merger that's there. What's one thing that you can remember, good or bad, of the merger that you could teach me? Like if I was going to merge or partner with somebody, what's one thing that you learned that you wish you would have done when you put the merger together? Anything come to?
Own 51%.
Own 51. 50-50 is tough, isn't it?
It is. It is. 50-50 is tough. Fortunately, in my case, my partner, I had a lot more experience than he did. I had a lot more, quote, connections in the industry, and he knew that. And so I was president of the company. Of course, we were 50-50, but and the brewery wanted me to run the company, and just mainly because of experience, and so that's what we did, but I would say own 51%, because then there's no question. You own the majority of the stock, and even if it's 1%. And but Todd, one thing I learned, there is no reward without risk in anything you do, and we knew we were taking a risk, but in my mind, I knew we were going to kick it. I knew we were going to crush it. And this was back before. This is a cool thing. This was back before craft beer, and so that's a whole nother story. And the first craft beer we got was Boulevard, and there's a great story behind that too. But that was all. It was back before craft, and back then Boulevard was called what they called that category a microbrewery. And of course, then it became craft. And
were you guys the funny story I have, and we talked about it a little bit, and your memory wasn't really there, but we may have to edit this out. This is either going to be a good part, or he's already editing right now. Okay? Right. I remember a story that was told to me about you and your dad going to what would it be, like a trade show or somewhere, convention.
Yeah.
And people were looking for distributors for all of these different products. And I would imagine for you, you're like going, look, we're already running out to Hayes, or we're running to Marysville. We might as well stock these other shelves while we're doing it. But the story I remember, and it could not even be a correct story, was when water came out.
Right.
Okay. I don't remember if it was your dad who wanted the water to sell water, or if it was you.
It was
your
me.
Dad looked at you like you were crazy. Do you remember that story at all?
Yeah, I do, Todd. And as a matter of fact, that was when Coors came out with a water, and it was called Coors Pure Sparkling Water. And they had like 3 flavors, and it was sparkling. It wasn't still. And I think they had a lemon and a lime and maybe a berry flavored, and of course it was a Coors brand. But I'll never forget. My dad always would say, Dad, God bless him, he couldn't think out of the box that far, because he was late 50s, 60 years old, and I was barely 30.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Dad was a little bit apprehensive about selling bottled water. But, you know, you're right. Our truck went to grocery stores, convenience stores, restaurants, bars, clubs.
Yeah.
So why not have it on the truck, and why not try to sell it?
Yeah, I could imagine
you're going
that.
there anyway.
I'd love the conversation because it's easy for somebody under the age of 30 going, well, I don't understand why that would be such a big deal or why that story's funny. You have to remember, bottled water, I don't know when that came around, but like, who would buy bottled water? I mean, I imagine that's what your dad's going, look, you get it out of the drinking fountain,
That's
it's
true.
free. Who's going to pay $2 for a bottle of water? And I think more bottled water is now sold than
It's
any,
crazy.
you know, it's how much, it's,
I mean, you
I don't even get it out of the faucet anymore, you
well,
know?
the brands, the bottled water brands, you know, look what Coke and Pepsi have done with their bottled water brands, and then the international brands like Evian and Fiji water.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy the amount. You're right. Whoever thought they could sell bottled water?
Yeah.
But it makes complete sense.
Yeah, 100%.
And so, and along with that, you know, I always felt like the more products we could put on our truck, it justified going to more places because we had more things to sell.
Yeah.
It made for a longer day, but it also allowed that route salesman or that salesman to make more money.
Yeah.
And that was my whole idea was how can I make my people more money?
So let's fast forward all the way to 2020. Is that when you sold did you get out in 2020 and sell the dealership?
Yeah, I did. It was during COVID, and I unfortunately had gotten COVID in in October of 20. Went down to Cabo and came back with COVID, and
Nice.
And so
It's probably better than what you could have come back with anything worse. Maybe,
true.
So
true.
COVID may not be the worst thing.
Right.
You can come
Could have
back
been
from
worse.
Cabo.
Right, right. So you know, and by that time, we'll back up just a little bit. Back up a couple years. My partner Kelly at the time, his father had come down with Alzheimer's, unfortunately, and I'll never forget. Kelly called me one day, and I knew his dad was dealing with Alzheimer's, and his mother just wasn't. Jerry was an ex-boxer. Kelly's dad was an ex-boxer, and he was a wild one. And his mother couldn't take care of him. So Kelly called me one day, and he said, "Hey, I got to get out. I need you to buy me out." And we had just got done paying off our note with Sunfire Bank, and I'll never forget. It was a 10-year loan, and we paid it off in 7. And we, you know, easy way to do that is just accelerate your payments.
Right.
And that's what we did. But so Kelly called me and he said, I need you to buy me out. And I'm going, oh, dude, we just got done paying off this huge loan. And I was 59 years old at the time. And I'm going, you know, I don't think I want to buy you out. He said, well, then you need to find somebody you can work with and have them buy me out. Well, I had friends in the industry, and there was another family business from Fort Collins, Colorado, and they were good friends of mine. And so I called Dave one day, and I said, hey, Dave, I said, you know, you always told me that if we ever wanted to sell, to let you know. I said, well, I don't want to sell, but my partner does. Well, they came in and struck a deal with Kelly, and then they became my 50% partners.
Okay.
And that's why I mentioned 50% again, because that's where
Right.
it came into play. And so
It'd been nice to buy maybe 5% of Kelly's and then only allow him to sell 45
correct.
off.
And I didn't think about that
Yeah.
at the time, but you're right, it would have been. And I'm not sure they would have done the deal that way.
Yeah, probably.
They might not have, but they were my new partners for 2 years, and they pretty much ran their business. They had a lot larger distributorship in Fort Collins, and they were Miller Coors, but they had all this craft, and they had huge craft portfolios, and we had a huge craft portfolio towards the end of my tenure, and so they ended up buying Kelly and became my partners, and then I got COVID in October of 2020, and the son of this gentleman who ended up buying us, his son, 40 years old, a lot younger than me, had more energy.
We call that piss and vinegar.
And vinegar, and but one thing I didn't realize is that, and I should have realized it because the same thing happened to me. He wanted his son to take over that business eventually. So although I was president of the company and like I said, a 50% owner, my sister and I were 50% owners. I saw the writing on the wall, and they wanted to move our office, the front office, to Fort Collins, which I pushed back on because I wanted to keep our people here, and so eventually it got to the point, Todd, where he and I didn't agree on the way to run our business, and we built I'll never forget, my dad always told me that we're gonna build our business around customer service, and that's what we did. And when these new guys came in, and nothing against them because they're great people,
right?
It was just a new business philosophy that a lot of beer distributors, pop distributors, were doing, and I hate to say this, but it's true. You have to figure out where you can cut back on service, because delivering to an account that is only buying 2 or 3 cases a week, and you're running that truck there every week, you got to figure out how to reduce that delivery expense. And so like I said, the writing was on the wall, and we started negotiating with them, and the rest is history. We struck a deal, and December 31st of 2020 was my last day. And you talk about shock. You work your rear end off for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden you come in.
You got nowhere to go.
You got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You got
I was
nowhere
talking
to go.
I saw Calabrese the other day,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Hey, congratulations on selling your company and all that stuff." And he goes, "Don't ever do it."
It's tough.
And I said, "What do you mean, don't ever do it?" And he goes, "I got nowhere to go." He goes,
Right.
I got nowhere to go. Like, I sold it all, and like they don't
Right.
need me. I can't go into the office. I can't do it. And he goes, "That's all I've ever known."
Exactly. And I was the same way. I didn't play golf. I only played in tournaments that we would sponsor,
Right.
and stuff like that. And I'll never forget, my dad told me, he says, if you can't make any money on the golf course, don't do it. Go out and sell more beer.
So a couple things you said here, and then we're going to run over to the community side of it. But what my takeaway is, like, I love visiting with guys like you and asking these questions, and then just listening, because like I'm at a point where in my business right now going, okay, if somebody wanted to merge with me, or for, people say, well, you can't do it alone, and to get bigger, you got to maybe join forces,
Right.
which I think is always funny in the fact I've watched, and mostly on TV, but I've seen it in real life, where I've always been amazed on how a guy could start a company and then get kicked out of his own company by a board or whatever.
Right.
It still amazes me how that can happen. Like their company gets taken over
It
when they get
happens.
started. But I'm thinking about me, if I merged with somebody, like I like to call the shots. Like,
Right.
I know I would be a terrible partner
Right.
if I was 50-50. Like, if you owned a real estate company and we wanted to merge and be the biggest in Salina and grow in Hayes and all that, like, that sounds cool.
Right.
But it comes with a whole nother set of problems.
Absolutely.
And so to get big, I get it.
Yeah.
But I guess I would rather buy you out than to bring on a
know-
partner. And if that wasn't feasible, if I couldn't go get $2 or $3 million to buy you out, I guess I would just be fine staying where I'm at. And I don't know, what do you think, that's small thinking, or because you've done it? Like, would you do it all over again the exact same way?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, there was a lot of sleepless nights, and I just had a vision, Todd. I knew where the industry was going. I knew craft was going to just take off, which it did. It didn't take off to the point where it outsold domestics, but it took off.
Yeah.
And I knew, I had a vision. And I had a lot of friends in the industry all over the country, and I watched what they did, and I participated in a group, and the acronym is KEG. Imagine that, and it's called a Knowledge Exchange Group. And it was a bunch of distributors from all over the country, and I was in that group. And so we'd go to these meetings, and of course we always tried to pick exotic locations. And so, but and basically it was a round table of other distributors, and you bounced things
Right.
off each other. And I'm sure you'd probably do this in your business.
Yeah, definitely.
And it helps to hear what other people are doing, what makes them successful, what works, what doesn't work. And so that's kind of that was why I think that's why we did so well.
Yeah.
And because we tried to model ourselves after these really big, huge mega distributors. And when I left, Todd, we went from, when I started in the business, we went from selling about 700,000 cases in 21 counties to when I sold out, we were doing about 2.3 million cases, and we were in 38 counties.
Wow.
So it was
And it would have only been possible because of the merger and
Absolutely.
the acquisition
Correct.
and all that.
Yeah,
So,
that was the only way.
okay, well, maybe we'll rethink
Right.
my mindset a little bit. But that's what I mean. It's great
Right.
to hear from that of going, okay, how big do I want to get?
Yes.
How big do I want to get, and how does that want to work? So
Yep.
you did it successfully, and by being successful, you had some good money, and you just didn't. What I want to get back to is the community leader post.
Right.
The Ritter name made the money, but they invested it back in the community.
Correct. We tried to.
Yeah. And so that's one thing that I like about that. Huge Sacred Heart supporters. I always remember that. Your family,
Right.
your dad graduated from Sacred Heart,
My
correct?
dad, all my dad's brothers, and some of his sisters graduated from there. Yeah, I graduated from there, and
Yeah. So always a big supporter of Sacred Heart.
Correct,
I remember
yes.
everything that was being done that the
You
Ritter
bet.
family did for Sacred Heart. And then your dad was on the council, and then he became mayor.
Correct.
In like 86, 87.
86, right.
Yeah, he was mayor in
86,
86,
87.
87. And then so for you on the boards, like give me an idea of non-for-profit boards or anything like that mean a lot to you in the community.
Well, I think, Todd, I'll never forget, Dad always told me, you've got to be seen in the community. You've got to participate in the community. You got to get involved. Of course, Dad being on the city commission, and then later on became mayor. And I never had those aspirations to get into politics. I kind of did, but I was too busy. I was too busy in the beer business, and actually thought about it, but I'm glad I didn't, because I wouldn't have had time I didn't have time for my family hardly the way it was, and which unfortunately a divorce later down the road makes you get involved with your family. And so if there was any drawbacks about working your rear off and being gone, working 10, 12 hours a day, that would have been it, was family. But that all ended up working out great. But as far as community goes, I think the first thing I did is I got involved in the chamber. I went through one of the first leadership Salina classes that they had, and I want to say that was in 86, 88, maybe not, something like that. So I got involved in the chamber through Leadership Salina, and then I think the first city committee I got on was the Solid Waste Committee. I just wanted to.
Seems like a great committee for you.
I wanted to dip my foot into the water, and I was just looking for something to get involved with, and so the Salina Solid Waste Committee was, and this was back before, of course, curbside recycling and all the recycling programs that are going. And the reason I did that was because Coors was really big in the recycling. And so it would allow me to learn a little bit more about recycling, and so that was the first committee I got on, and then I believe the next one was the Sacred Heart Junior Senior High School Endowment Board, and was on that for a number of years, like 6 years, 8 years, and got involved there, and really enjoyed that. Sacred Heart was always near and dear to our heart, and then from there, I just kept getting. Of course, once you're on one committee, and everybody in town sees your name on letterheads or whatever, and the phone starts ringing, and one thing I learned is I never could say no, and I always wanted to help people, but there comes a time when you've got to say no.
Yeah.
And so.
And the truth is, being on other boards, for people listening, is I would rather influential people say no if they know they can't commit the time.
Correct.
And they're not going to show up to those meetings. Because I've been on many boards.
Yep.
And when the people don't show up and they don't really contribute to it, you've just taken a space up for somebody else who would have said yes.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
for me, I had to learn that going, okay, like I was on 3 or 4 boards at one time, president of Girl Scouts and CAPS and Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and all simultaneously. And I just got to the point going, okay, it's okay that I can say no. Like,
Right.
I appreciate the call, and right now I just can't find it in the space or the time, or I'm serving somewhere
Right.
else. And so my advice to somebody who's kind of growing up in Salina right now is get on one and be really good on that board.
Absolutely.
Every meeting, learn the financials,
Yep.
be a contributor at the meeting, really understand what the mission and the goal is of that organization that you're on, and then be the face of that person for the time that you're on it. And then when it's your time to leave, then get on another board.
Right.
But don't don't be on the board to be on the board.
Yeah, you get to a point where you get more. If you're on more than 2 or 3, it's tough. It's tough to really give them.
And you got to be there almost a couple of years, because I can't tell you how many times, I'm going to tell on myself, that you walk in and they hand you a set of financials. And if you don't know how to read a set of financials and then you're voting on it, like I can remember a couple of them on, and like, well, here's our financials and this is our projections and this is what we've done and all this. All in favor indicate by saying aye. And I'm like, well, aye.
Yeah.
You know, I had no idea what I'm even voting on.
No,
and
that's
so
true.
that's what I'm saying is like I wasn't involved in some of those where I couldn't even get. So it's like that's my thing for anybody listening for community involvement is start out with one board and just be the face and really get in and dive into that particular organization. So you have to make sure it's something you really believe in. Just don't get on it to get on it, to get your name out there.
Right. And so after I was on Sacred Heart's endowment board, then I started getting involved in the chamber more. Ended up becoming chamber chairman. Gosh, well, how long ago was that? 6 years ago, maybe 4, 6 years ago. The chamber was a great board. This was back before downtown, the Salina 2020, Imagine Salina. And I could go on forever with that thing,
Right.
because it was
Because you're
just,
on 2020, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I was one of the original members on Salina 2020,
And tell the viewers what Salina 2020 was.
Salina
developed
2020 was the start of the downtown renovation. Pretty much, it was the early stages of the downtown renovation, and of course the Walker family was huge in making all this happen, and a lot of other people too, but my involvement in it was minuscule as compared to the Walkers and all the other people who were in Salina 2020.
Yeah.
But you know, Todd, I've lived here all my life, with the exception of the time I was going to school in Lawrence, and everything that Salina 2020 said would happen has happened. And you can start with Brian Richardson in the field house.
Yeah.
And from there, things they started clicking. And
for those of you watching this, we interviewed Brian Richardson.
Yes.
So you have to go back and watch that on the Community Leader.
Right.
I don't know if it's probably 7, 8, or 9, 10,
Yeah.
somewhere in there we did with Brian, but he had great things to all the people who were involved in it.
Right.
And then what spun out of 2020, a lot of people don't know this, I may be giving some inside information. There's actually an investor group who
Right.
bought buildings. What's the name? Is it Grassroots?
Yes, and
It's
I wasn't involved in that side of it. I was just involved in the startup and in the original startup of Salina 2020. But like I said, very small part as compared to other people who had this incredible vision. And Brian Richardson had this vision.
Yeah.
And to give him his credit is Brian got this all started. I feel, and
Right.
then of course I know the Walker family was sitting back watching all this, and they were participating, I believe, and then when they got involved, and you know, Trace and Guy and their whole company out there just were amazing.
Yeah.
And the dream they had, the vision they have, is what we have now.
Yeah.
And I don't know about
think we're
you.
not done yet.
No, we're not done yet. And I don't know about you, but we spend a lot of time downtown now. It's fun. There's stuff to do now. It's just I could go all day about it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I do wish I was still in the beer business because it's just created. It's a fun place to go now. We're having my 45-year class reunion Labor Day weekend, and it's downtown.
Yeah.
And
well, we just had dinner last night with some friends at the Prickly Pear downtown. You
Right.
know? And before that, we were at the Barillo, and before that, we ate at Paramount, and before
Correct.
so like when we leave to go, like I spend probably 75% of my day in the downtown east area, kind of there. That's been all renovated. And when I brought friends to town, I wanted to show it off, and I took them down there. And
you
they
had
were
a class
amazed.
reunion downtown, didn't you?
No, but not a class reunion.
You
no.
had a group, but you had a.
I had a group come in, a bunch of
Right.
real estate, kind of like you said with your
Right.
organization.
Right.
So I had a bunch of real estate agents who
Okay.
visited my company.
Right.
And we did that downtown.
Yeah.
So
they
love
it's
it.
it's very cool, and as you said, they're not done yet.
Right.
And you look at the hotel downtown. It's incredible, and the stories you hear about people from Kansas City who like to come to Salina on the weekends.
Right.
Did you ever think you'd hear that? And I know
The hotel's booked.
Oh,
it's booked out.
Yeah,
They're
their
way
occupancy is
booked
sky
out.
high. So,
Yeah.
but it's a tribute to all the people who had that vision.
Yeah.
And amazingly enough, that vision has come true. And what's really cool, Todd, is you hear around town the naysayers, the people who were against that from the beginning. And what's neat is to listen to some of them now say how cool downtown Salina turned out.
Yeah. Since you grew up in downtown Salina when you were a kid, not downtown specifically, but what's one thing you remember as a small child about downtown Salina? Is there anything that comes to mind of
The Fox Theater. Yeah. I mean,
And that was the movie theater back then.
that was the movie theaters. Now the Stiefel, and that's where we went to movies.
Yeah.
And the sticky floor and the smell of popcorn and that was we went there, and of course the Vogue was downtown then. The Vogue Theater was there, and I'm trying to think of other things, but downtown Salina has just done this. I don't know if renaissance is the right word, but it's just it's a fun place to be now.
Is there any place that you could go to in Salina that immediately takes you back to when you were a young kid, 10, 12, 15 years old?
Oh gosh, that's a great question.
That's
a long time ago.
I know, but I could think of, I grew up in Arkansas. A lot of people don't know that, but
Right.
I was there until I was probably, I don't know what the third or fourth grade would be. But I can think back of a particular place of, like a smell or whatever will hit me back there,
Right.
and it'll take me back to that specific spot of wherever I'm at from growing up there, or even same thing in Denver on there. So I was just
Right.
curious, a long time resident, because I tell you what, I'm really starting to get involved in the history of stuff. I'm really starting to look at books and start to notice what used to be in these locations,
Right.
and like that the where the old YMCA was, and
Correct.
they tore it down,
Yes.
and they built another one, and now that's the parking
Right.
lot. And where the old hotels were
Yeah.
on the corners of where now the bowling alley is, and the Chamber of Commerce used to be a big hotel. I forget the name of it now.
Yeah, I can't think so.
So those things are cool to me. So I'm intrigued by the people who can remember those buildings, and then we tore them down.
Well, I remember the Y. I was a Y rat, and the Y was always the place to go on definitely weekends. The YMCA was almost mother's favorite place because it was a place where they could drop their kids off and they'd be taken care of all day.
Yeah.
And you were either playing basketball or you were in the youth area playing pool or ping pong, but it was all, you're down there getting exercise. And one of my best memories was going to we'd go down there and play basketball, and then we'd go to the Cozy for lunch. Well, back then Cozies were a quarter.
Yeah.
And we'd get a bag of Cozies and a Pepsi, and then we'd go back to the Y and burn it off.
Yeah.
So, but the YMCA, I do remember that building right across from the cathedral, and of course the post office, but if the YMCA has a lot of memories, and for me, because I grew up in the Y.
Yeah.
And So that's one place about downtown, and then there was other places. I'm trying to think. There was a cafe on 7th Street, I believe, right across from the United Life building, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name. It began with a V, but
Yeah.
there was lots of little mom and pop places back then, and so, but yeah, it's I have great memories of being a kid growing up in Salina, and yeah.
All right, so we've got about 2 minutes left. You ready for my final question
I
for
am.
you?
Fire away.
You got 24 hours to live in Salina, and you can't have somebody cook for you. Where are you going to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Oh boy.
Where would we find Mark Ritter in Salina for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well,
Yeah. Now you can't say you don't eat breakfast. You say you don't, but
no,
you're going out.
I
so
do.
what would you
I
do?
do. Because I work out almost every morning, and so I got to have breakfast.
Yeah. It's your final one. Your
yeah.
final breakfast. Where
Final
would you go?
breakfast. Well, when I was a kid, Russell's had the best breakfast in town, and so I'm going to have to say Russell's for breakfast.
Okay.
Just simply because we need a breakfast place downtown.
There may be one coming.
We really do.
There may be one coming.
That's good. Good to know. As far as lunch, oh man. Well, I will tell you one thing. I do remember a place which would have been great. And do you remember Shooters?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Shooters would have been my lunch place.
Yep. Monty Shadwick.
Monty Shadwick, and I wish I would have told you a quick Monty story, but
Well, Monty's coming on in. He was supposed to come on, and then something happened, and he couldn't. So
Right.
we've got him scheduled up for September.
Good. Well,
because I want to hear the story. Monty's got some amazing.
Monty's
stories.
got some great stories, and one of them was when he was getting ready wanted to do Blue Sky. He wanted to do a brewery, and he had consulted with me about it, and I said, Monty, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. Well, now we got Blue Sky, so it's
perfect.
And as far as dinner,
No, where was lunch? So where are you saying lunch?
Shooter's
not here anymore. So where are we going to
Shooter's
lunch?
not here. Oh man, La Casita.
La Casita.
La
That was
Casita.
mine. Yeah.
Yeah, La Casita
Yeah.
could be lunch and dinner. I love that place.
Yeah. And then now dinner.
Dinner. Wow. There's so many great places. You got the Scheme. I'm a big Scheme fan. I love. Where else? Probably, I like Yaya's. I like the Scheme. I like Blue Sky. I don't know. That's a tough one, Todd.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
Mine is the
we
Scheme.
have choices.
I know. That's what I mean. Mine is the
choices.
Scheme. So
Yeah.
we're going to go on record here that if he ever sells the Scheme and you get a chance to buy it, you have to bring me in.
Hey, done.
We'll get a bunch of
Done.
people together and buy the Scheme,
Done.
and it'll be done. Because that's the landmark.
It
you know?
is. It is. And
I don't want to tell him that. Hopefully he doesn't watch this. 'Cause
I've been
then
going
now
there
the price just went up.
Right,
You know?
the price went up, but I've been going there probably as long as you have, and I mean, I'll even go back to the day when I was trying to sell Dwayne beer, and he asked me to leave. Imagine that. No,
That surprises me.
yeah, but no, there's so many great places and historic places that go way back to the 80s, 70s, and 80s, and of course the Scheme is one of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, what I'm hearing you saying is if I see you at Russell's and then I see you at La Casita
Right.
and then the Scheme that night,
That's it.
I'm just going to say, Mark, it's nice knowing you.
Yes.
Those are going to be your
yes.
three places.
Right on.
So don't do a trifecta in one day and there and see me
I
there.
won't.
I'm going to spread the rumor that you're no longer with us.
Good.
But
Good.
man, it's been fun. I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you, buddy.
I really do.
It's been a good one.
Yeah, I really do. I appreciate the Ritter
Appreciate
name.
your friendship.
Everything that you guys have done for the community. That's the reason we want to do this spotlight is we need to let everybody out there know not only what you've done, but what your family's done and the big part that the Ritter name has played in the Salina community. So thank you for joining us.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you,
deal.
Todd.
Thank you.
Yep.